So what I will do is we'll do a quick introduction, just two things. One, it gets us to check your audio and video to make sure that it's fully functioning and working. And it also gives us a chance to talk about one of my favorite things, which is candy. And I'm only joking because that is going to be one of the opening questions. So what I will do is, again, I'm Mike Sable. I work for the city. My job is to make sure that you have a productive meeting session. I will be the guide and facilitator, and city staff will be the presenters of information, and you will be the masterminds behind how the meeting works. And so I appreciate everybody's participation tonight. By way of introductions, what I'd like you to do is, again, share your name so we can hear your audio, and then share with us your favorite Halloween treat, whether it's a candy bar or a Skittles or some sort of a favorite fall treat that you get trick-or-treating. So just by way of introduction for practice, again, I'm Mike Sable. I work for the city of Maplewood, and I am partial to an Almond Joy candy bar for Halloween. What I will do is I will call folks in advance. So I will go Neil, then Audra, then Bill, and then I'll kind of do the sequence in the order. Neil, if you'll go first. I saw your head at my Almond Joy, so help us, share with us what your favorite Halloween treat is. Tell us who you are.
I'm Neil Brenneman, Maplewood Parks and Recreation. Mine would be the fun size Milky Way. Not the full size, not the mini size, the fun size. It's just the right amount of internals to the outside chocolate combination.
Good. Thank you, Neil. Then next will be Audra, then Bill, then Nolan.
Hi, Audra Robbins, Parks and Recreation Manager, and I like an old classic, a Hershey's bar with almonds are my favorite.
I like that. Thank you very much. I can hear you just fine. Bill, then Nolan, then Dorothy, please.
Yeah, Bill Knudsen, Maplewood City Council. And I like just about anything that I used to be able to steal from my son's bags. Mostly chocolate.
Mostly chocolate. Good.
It's kind of lean in our neighborhood. We only get about 4 kids a year.
Yeah. Nolan, then Dorothy, then Vicky, please.
Nolan Cornell with the South St. Paul Youth Basketball Boys. I would say my favorite would be Twix, any size, preferably the large ones.
Good, thank you. You sound good too. Dorothy, then Vicky, then Mike Erickson, please.
Hi, Dorothy Molstad, Chair of the Maplewood Park and Rec Commission. I was going to say Almond Joy, but then you took mine. So, and if you ever had the Almond Joy candy, that's really good. But I'll say Pearson's salted nut rolls.
Oh, good one.
Local.
Wonderful. Vicky, then Mike, then Aaron, please.
Hey everyone, this is Vicky. My favorite candy is Reese's Peanut Butter Cups.
A classic. And you sound good. Thank you. Mike, then Aaron, then I've got Riken.
Hey, good afternoon. Mike Erickson representing the Maplewood Historical Society, and that's super easy. It is a Snickers bar, the small one. They're so good. Man. Yum, yum.
Good. Aaron, then Riken, and Bow, please.
Hey, everybody. Aaron Wolf here. I got to go with Twix. Twix is my thing.
Good. Thank you, Aaron. Beth, I'm joking. Welcome. How are you? Beth, then Bow, then Bryce, please.
Hi, my name is Beth Watchrood. I'm from NEU Soccer Club. This is my little guy, Riken. My favorite candy is Snickers. What's your favorite Halloween candy? Twix.
Oh, a lot of Twix tonight.
Or Snickers. Or Skittles.
Yes, all of them. Thanks, Beth. You sound good. Bow, and then Bryce, please.
Yes, hi everyone, this is Bao. Let's see, favorite Halloween candy, I would say I'm going to have to go with Kit Kat.
Excellent choice, excellent. And you sound good too. Bryce, you're last, or bring it up, save the best for last.
Great, Bryce Sheeran, City of Little Canada, and just a Butterfinger is great for me.
Right about that.
Well, I appreciate everybody indulging in a little bit of Halloween candy treats. It's around dinner time, so if you have loose candies and you're hungry, please go ahead and take some. Appreciate everybody's participation here for Park and Recreation Task Force meeting number 3. You know, the agendas are deliberately light, but the discussion is very robust, and that's what we intend tonight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to periodically share my screen, which I will start with now. And I will go through, and this is the task force agenda for tonight. We will review the October 6th meeting very briefly. And then we'll do, Neil and Audra will go through some Pierce City information, and we'll go through some, excuse me, some examples of benchmarks and models of cities large and small, close to us and far away. So you can get a sense for how other communities operate their parks systems and their programming elements. I think what we'll do is we'll do a mix of presentation, but also have some of the other websites up so you can get a feel for not only get to understand how they operate, but also see how they function. And then what I think we'll dive into then is some discussion around each of the pros and cons of each of the different models. And then what I hope we can get to at the end of tonight is really framing up those the direction we want to go. And I think as we go through each of the examples, what I would encourage folks to do is either write down questions or just ask them as we go. I will continue to monitor the screen to make sure that we're catching folks. If you want to use the chat box and would prefer to do that, I will be monitoring the chat box. So if there are no further questions, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of go through and just kind of walk through the meeting notes that I took last time. Again, if you are ever curious about what was said and when, we do keep recordings of these. And so you can go back and watch and say, well, there was that thing and I can't remember what it was. There's an opportunity to go back and watch these items. I try to take notes as we go along. And so last session, we talked about the Park and Rec Master Plan. I've made a link to the whole document, so we have a kind of a record of our discussion. And then really, I tried to capture some of the elements of the things that we talked about. Again, there was a lot of questions about how do you frame up decision-making for recommendations? How do we think about data and information? How do we compare just generally against other groups? And that's what the bulk of tonight's conversation is going to be about. We talked a little bit about community ed and YMCA, and I think those two entities are going to be common themes in our future discussions. We've talked about the types of things that athletic associations need to be successful. There is obviously significantly more things that are there that we can't capture everything, but when those items come up and it's really important, flag it for me so we can make sure that it's documented. But we also looked at certain cities that we would want to consider for comparisons. And so I'm going to stop sharing there. And I'm going to just ask the group, and I can see most of you, so I'm feeling pretty good. Is there anybody who would like to offer a comment or something that they saw or experienced in the 3 weeks or so since we last met? And I will just sort of open it up. Mike Erickson, you unmuted, so I'm going to say, do you want to go first?
Yes. Actually just returned from a walk. A lot less people out now that it's gotten colder walking our trails and sidewalks. That's probably number one. Yeah.
Good.
But doesn't stop us, my wife and I.
Good. Other reactions or things that they've seen or want to share information on? Bill.
I'm just impressed with the cooperation. I've got some ideas around co-op and cooperation that I'd like to see how that unfolds, especially when we look at other communities, because I'm especially impressed with Little Canada and Oakdale, and they're proximate and very engaged, and we're all a little bit different sizes, different populations and all that, but yet the goal is to kind of look at more or less the watershed of what's available for recreation. So I'm I'm really encouraged.
Excellent. Neil or Audra, do you want to share anything, or is there anything I can offer, or anything that you'd like to add in the time? Because you've obviously done the bulk of the work between now and then. Anything you'd offer to the group?
This might be off topic, and Bill, I'm not sure if this was the article you were referring to in the Pioneer Press, but I don't know if you have that, Mike, we actually made the Sainted and Tainted column in the Pioneer Press this past week, and someone was nice enough to write in that they really appreciated that we take care of the trails and that they use the trails to walk their dog and do bike riding. And it was a resident of North St. Paul, but he just really appreciated that the crew, even with this last snow, which was kind of a weird one, instead of letting it go, they did make a point to get out and clear the trails and the main trails in the park so people could still enjoy their walk. And this resident of North St. Paul appreciated it. So thanks, Bill, for suggesting to share it with the group. But it just shows that people really do appreciate, and they, even if it's less people now, they're still out there using the trails, and they count on us to keep them open.
Little FYI on that, Audra and Bill, that's Bob Horner I actually coached with. He's still one of our coaches for North High School. Yeah, softball coach. He's our B squad coach. Good guy. Very good guy.
All right, that's a nice connection.
Yep.
Well, it was fun at the city council last night to hear about that, it's encouragement for working really hard to come up with a good plan. So
awesome.
Yeah, it doesn't take a lot. I mean, right, plowing a trail is a big deal for people who need access to the outdoors, and so sometimes it doesn't have to be the grand gesture, but it's the simple gesture that makes it a little bit easier for folks. So that was a great story. Are there any other comments or reflections folks want to share with the group? I'm not seeing any, so I am going to turn it over to Audra and Neil, who are going to kind of talk through, it's a little review of maybe the region. One of the things, and I'll sort of set it up this way, I think there are 81 cities in the metropolitan area of Minneapolis and St. Paul. Some are very big, some are very small. And they all sort of operate in a different way. And what we wanted to do is give you a flavor for kind of the differences. And so what we've kind of decided as a presentation flow is we're going to go from big to small. And so we're going to look at cities like Woodbury and Plymouth as sort of, they're big, there's 70,000 people. They've got a lot of variety of services, and you can get a flavor for how they function and how they operate. I think the next group that we're going to look at is a next city size down, which is Coon Rapids, which is around 60,000 people, but really a very different model. They don't offer a lot of recreation programming as a city. And so you can kind of see how they are, how they provide service in a different kind of a way. Even though they're large, they're not very robust, and you can get a distinction for how that works. The next community that we're going to look at is Brooklyn Center. And part of what I want you to think about in Brooklyn Center is that they really use sort of a regional model. So they recruit and share services with Crystal, the cities of New Hope and city of Robbinsdale, and partnerships with Brooklyn Park. So they're a city not dissimilar from the city of Maplewood in terms of geography and size, but a very different kind of service delivery model. Then we're going to go to our closest peer, which is the city of Roseville. Similar size, similar offerings, maybe slightly different way, but they're really very similar to the city of Maplewood. And then lastly, we're going to look at the city of Andover. And part of why we chose the city of Andover is they have a robust partnership with their YMCA. And so as you're watching the presentation, what I'd encourage you to do is to think about the maybe 5 different ways of delivering service and how they work and how they function. And then thinking about what are the things that the city of Maplewood would have to do in order to either replicate that or shift. And so really kind of as you watch and you listen and you ask a lot of questions, think about there's really maybe 5 ways to deliver these services. And so the one question I have for Neil and Audra is I don't remember who goes first.
Actually, we were actually talking and this particular task, I would say, for the task force. Neil did a lot of the legwork and talked to officials at different cities. He put in a lot of the time. So I'm going to turn over to Neil to kind of walk you through what he heard as far as personal comments, and I'll chime in where necessary, and we'll just go from there if that works for you.
I'm here to work for you. So you tell me,
Yep.
Neil, I say Neil.
Yep. All right.
Neil, would you like me to show the little chart that you threw together?
Sure.
Okay, I will do that.
Well, he's pulling that up. I think just kind of an overview of what we're looking at here, kind of what the document is. So I kind of oversimplified just for the sake of looking at delivery models more than full detail of program offerings. So I kind of separated into 4 main areas: youth athletics, whether that be, mostly in the leagues category, youth sports leagues. Then youth programs, which is maybe not necessarily leagues, but maybe it can be sports clinics, or it could be a youth dance program, youth gymnastics, youth karate, any other types of youth program, even camps, things like that. Adult athletics, any adult league program, or even essentially adult sports leagues. And then adult programs and or senior activities or active aging programs. And each one of those categories kind of, obviously there's a lot of, you can get down into the minutia, a lot of more detail kind of breakouts, but for the most part, those are the 4 main categories I think a lot of these, most of the programs fall into. And also show each one of those is kind of the big break off where the model deliveries kind of shift between each other. There's 4 main ones that I think everybody's fairly used to. Associations being one of them, internal or city offered programs, the community ed programs, and then either other delivery models or a combination of multiples of those. So for each of those categories, I went through the city websites, and then for some of them talked to some staff members as well, and went through whether it was their current website or, obviously with some of the with COVID right now, there's a lot of websites don't have everything listed, just maybe what they have going on currently. So knowing that, then going back through previous brochures from like last year to kind of get a feel for in that city, what they're offering, how they're offering it, who's offering it, and then in each one of those made just some kind of notes that popped out to me, and then kind of tried to put it into one of those 4 categories, so we can kind of see there's a few different models that some of our that the cities will be looking at specifically use. Now, most of these for the youth programs, adult athletics and adult programs are all fairly, for the most part, they're pretty standard in offerings. A lot of those are city-based offerings, even if there's youth sports aren't around. A lot of them are city-based, but there's some community ed overlap in some of them as well. The big difference comes in the delivery models of youth athletics for most cities. That's the ones where it's generally the biggest difference from department to department or city to city. So we can kind of see on some of these as we go through them what those differences were. And for some background, as you see, and Maplewood is the first one on the list. The youth athletics, youth programs, adult athletics, and adult programs were all offered internally with our staff delivering those programs. Now, in amongst all of those, and some of these notes, you'll see there's notes on subcontract programs and stuff like that. Most cities will subcontract out programs where they'll have a company come in and offer a program. And in that case, I still consider that a city offering because it's offered through the city, through the Parks and Rec department, essentially. So that's kind of the caveat there as we're looking through some of those.
So Neil, can I stop you right there? I think one of the things that what, I don't work in rec programming, so it's hard for me to know exactly what they're talking about all the time, but sometimes is it something that you're building or is it something that you're buying? And even though the registration is always through the city, sometimes it's a purchase service and sometimes it's a service you delivered yourself. And that maybe is a helpful distinction for folks that, some things you choose to buy and something like if you're fixing up your home, you might buy a home handyman or you might go to Home Depot and build it yourself. And so there's sort of two different models for that kind of delivery. So if that's helpful to think about that piece of it, I think that's maybe an easy way to do that.
That's
So
good clarification.
Hey, Neil, Mike Erickson here. Say, just for clarification, when you talk about subcontracting out, can you give us just a couple of examples where you would do that? Bringing in an outside out.
Yeah, sure. So for example, our youth dance and our youth karate, like our youth dance, that one of the program that we had kind of talked about in that second meeting, where it's an outside entity, a company, and we work with them. They essentially, say, here's what we have to charge per student. They send us that information, and we put that information in the book, and we'll charge a little extra on top of that. But the revenue income from that is a much different level than it is on an in-house program. But it's bringing in an outside company that maybe specializes in that or has the employees and staff to that are really focused on that specific program, and then bringing them in and working with them.
And if I could add on to that, so with the benefits for that are, as the city, you don't have to struggle to find instructors or part-time students or college students who may be going back to school, that kind of thing. It's a company that teaches all over the metro area, and they'll have dance programs in several parts of the metro. So they've got core teachers that between all the sites could be working full-time, so they can retain staff a little bit better. So you might get a more consistent, better product that way. So we don't have to manage the staffing portion, but then we handle the registration and the finance part of it. So that helps that company out. They don't have to worry about that part of it. So there are definitely benefits to it that way.
Aaron is a great example of a successful subcontract participation for city program. Mike, do you think it's possible to zoom in on the PDF and we can kind of maybe scroll down and see by city? Someone said it was hard to read.
Yep. Where do you want me to go?
We'll start with Woodbury. So as you guys can see, so we started with Woodbury and Plymouth are kind of, we'll talk maybe about Woodbury, but Plymouth and Woodbury kind of are very similar in size, scope and the way they offer programs. So you kind of consider those kind of one and the same as far as delivery methods. The youth athletics for Woodbury specifically, I know that was brought up. They're heavy associations, youth athletics, almost entirely for their youth athletic leagues. They do intro to sports programs generally for look like 6 and under. And again, some of these there may be other programs that are on there, but as a whole, that's kind of an overview. So they intro to sports programs, which you'll see in many of them, is the city maybe offers these intro to sports programs for the younger age groups prior to kind of recreational league age. So then their youth programs were almost entirely city offered. Same with their adult athletics and adult programs. They did, again, just like many other cities, many programs were contracted out to other businesses that would come in and operate those. Plymouth was the same. They varied just a little bit on the youth athletics portion. They offer some youth leagues as well, and just depending on what associations weren't around or weren't there offering certain programs, but for the most part, everything else is the same. One of the programs that's seems to be pretty popular now it's Revolution Sports or Sports Unlimited, where it's, and Skyhawks as well. They're all fairly similar in the business model of kind of sports specific skill building, and some of them are leagues and that they come in and do programming. Again,
one benefit to those programs, Neil, too, is with COVID, they've got all their COVID plans in place, and they take care of all of making sure the staff is following protocols and that kind of thing. So the city doesn't necessarily have to do that for each program. Those companies help take care of that portion of it.
And that's also a good point to bring up. When putting this together, in communicating with some of the other staff in the cities too, I did make clear we're referencing their delivery model in a non-COVID year, so like 2019, just in that way that on a normal year how they would deliver programs. Now the program specific stuff, obviously is different this year, but as the overall umbrella as a whole, this is supposed to be non
status quo
2020, so ideal operation, I guess. Then the next one is Coon Rapids, and that's another, again, you can see 63,000 larger community. Their youth athletics programs were entirely association driven and middle school driven. They don't offer any youth athletics or youth programs. All their youth programs were through community ed. So that was one of the only ones in the group that I went through that was strictly community ed for like even youth programs. So there's a kind of a stronger relationship there with community ed than most of them I've seen. Their adult athletics is the same. So they ran adult softball internally with the city. Otherwise, the rest of any other adult leagues and programs were community ed for adult athletics. And the adult programs is pretty much community ed. They did the ones that they do offer was they have a pretty strong offering at their community or their senior center in the city that does a lot of stuff, a lot of programs in the senior center. So that's the relationship there between city and community ed for Coon Rapids. Again, the big takeaway here is for all the youth programs, youth athletics, and youth programs, all non-city, for the most part, non-city operated programs.
Say, Neil, before you go on, I want to stop. So you've seen, you've got an example for, there's really 4 broad categories and the big differences in youth athletics. As you look at this at a high level, what initial questions do you have, or what information do you want to see a little bit differently? We can pull up their websites and you can get a flavor for what it looks like from a resident standpoint. Just trying to get a reaction, initial reaction from folks on the call. Does this layout make sense? Is there more information that you would need or want from either Neil or Audra or myself? And I'll open it up to the group. I can see Mike Erickson's hand trying to feverishly hit the mute button. So I'm going to go, Mike Erickson, you want to say something?
Thank you. I think it's important for us to see this. First off, thanks, Neil and Audra. I think it's important as we move forward to take a look at if that city can do it, can we do it? And then more important to that, just how many cities are having the city do everything versus the associations. And I think that's important information for us as we look to come up with some recommendations. So good data. Thank you very much for getting it.
Good. Dorothy, go ahead.
It seems to me, my recollection is that maybe at the first meeting, there was some discussion about associations and that it had been tried in Maplewood and had failed miserably. If we're going to be looking at going back to an association model, I think we need to find out what went wrong before and how we're going to correct that before we move forward with that.
Hey, Dorothy,
go ahead.
If I could speak to that, I think part of the history is that Maplewood didn't have a lot of association that was encompassing all of the youth sports. it was focused on baseball, and we did have our association for soccer. Back in the day, it was called NISA, and Beth is part of the organization now. It's morphed into Northeast United, but I don't know if it was a failure so much as, you know, they just didn't develop, and I don't know exactly what those reasons were, but the city has always been strongly programming for youth sports, so that might have been part of the reason. But you're right, we would need to take a look at, if we went down the route of trying to form associations, what best practices would be, and how, you know, get advice from, you know, the communities that have really strong associations to see how that would work. I agree.
There's two questions in the chat box, and maybe Neil, this is one for you. Question from Beth around price and around success. Is the amount of residents using programming versus in community ed versus contracted out? And then the other question from Vicky was, how does the city make money from associations? Two broad questions around price and success.
And as far as the pricing question goes, I guess is that Beth, is that something specific, or just kind of an overall?
Like, how much would it cost a person to join soccer with the city versus if the city had a contracted organization doing it? You know, is it twice as much to have it subcontracted out for a person to join? And then the other question was, are more people joining with the city, or would more people join with a subcontracted outfit?
Those are good questions. I don't know as far as, I mean, I think part of that really depends on what their options are at the time they're looking to participate. If the city offers a subcontracted program, but they don't have another offering, that's kind of, the route you go with. And now as far as pricing is concerned, generally in my experience, it can be a little bit more expensive for contract programs, but it's not a lot of difference, to be honest with you. And part of that is also maybe taking a hit on the back end internally as far as revenue. It's harder to make revenue, or it's not as easy to make the revenue contracting out programs as it is to do them internally. So that's kind of, that would be the flip side of that, is we could charge more, let's say, for a contract program to make that revenue difference up. But then you're talking, maybe prohibitively more than they would be if it was run internally. So that's kind of the benefit and drawback at the same time. Is benefit of the contract employees. It's a cookie cutter program they can bring in and run. They've perfected it, that kind of thing. The drawback would be, the revenue on that is, if you're going to try to make the same amount of revenue, generally it's going to cost more. So it kind of depends on the value of the city at that point too, as far as what they're looking for in those offerings, whether it's revenue heavy or being able to offer something. Does that kind of answer that question a little bit, or help a little bit?
She gives a thumbs up for yes. So then Vicky's question was, how does the city make money from associations? And then I'll go to Bryce, who's got his hand up. So
sure. So the interesting thing with that is kind of looking at a few other one of the ways was in talking with, I believe it was St. Louis
Park. Yep.
It had, so when I talking with him, he would charge them back $8 per kid, that the $8 per child for that center for the association. So at the end of the season, they would, cut them a check for $8 times however many kids that they had in their program. So they made money that way from the association in exchange for essentially using the field and things like that. They also had in St. Louis Park, the associations would do most of the field maintenance. So they would have the city would provide supplies there, rakes, field rakes and chalk and things like that. And they would lay the chalk lines, they would rake the field when they're done, put the tarps on, that kind of thing. So they would do a lot of the maintenance. The city would come out and do a periodic, drag or field upkeep. Obviously, it's a soccer field, mowing them and that kind of thing. But it was, so in that way, it's also saving the city money and staff time, not having to do those things. But then also making up some of the fees associated with those supplies, but also the some revenue from letting them use the fields, essentially. And then after talking with Roseville too, kind of another tweak to that is they, to be an affiliated association, essentially using their fields and being advertised and stuff, they require them to have rec level program offerings in their associations, and that they're affordable. Essentially, that's not. They can offer traveling and competitive, but they're also required them to provide a recreational offering for the same sport for the community at an affordable rate as well. So that's kind of another way that the city is able to maybe not make tangible dollars on the association, but save some money or divert the resources to a different area. If that kind of answers the question.
Mike, before you go on, Bryce has got his hand up. I'll go to you after that. Go ahead, Bryce.
I can only speak for Little Canada, but in Little Canada, how we make money off of associations is we charge a field usage and maintenance for each group that comes in, and we do have different levels of service. So if Roseville Area Youth Baseball wants to come in and use our fields, we are going to charge them an amount. If they say, we'd like the field striped beforehand, that is going to increase the amount of time that our maintenance staff is there, so it increases the amount we charge, and we kind of have a rate schedule for that. And that's the same across the board with if soccer comes in, how many times do they need it striped, what size striping, and all these different these different levels of service. I wish I had a really dialed into a fee schedule that I could share, but unfortunately I don't have that. And then in regards to price, and again, just for Little Canada, and in my experience, is the associations are considerable amount more money. They have bigger things. They can offer the traveling, the jerseys, the helmets, the bats, where the rec offering is that affordable option. Everyone gets to play, everyone gets that chance, and it's an activity. We're going to learn some of the fundamentals that hopefully is instilled in these kids, and then at least my idea with the associations are, they are out looking for wins and looking for teams that can make it, and they have these great things that they can offer these teams. And that's fantastic, where you're not going to see that rec league in general produce great players. They're going to want to play. You get better by playing better people, and they're going to want to play with the association. So the rec loses out on a lot of those players to the associations. And just in thinking about this in general, and I was not aware of Roseville having that clause saying that they had to have a rec league. Maybe that's a great option. That's something that I jotted down here as I want to explore. In Little Canada, we can't get kids to play baseball. Why fight it? Why? Maybe I should just reach out to Roseville Area Youth Baseball and say, hey, if you guys are offering a rec league, and it's affordable, what's the point of competing? Why not just send all of our kids to you guys? So those are kind of some of my 2 cents on a few of those questions.
Sure.
Appreciate that, Bryce. Mike
Bryce, you're spot on. You're spot on. You took just about everything I wanted to say, but I wanted to, for many years, coaching soccer at the rec level, baseball, both baseball at the rec level, soccer at the rec level, but softball at both club. Dramatic difference for those of you who don't know. When you're paying to play on a club, you pay dramatically more. Twice as much, 3 times as much. Hockey, God forbid, through the roof. So
Yeah.
the important thing is if that for cities to look at it, it's always been the focus on the rec to do exactly what Bryce said, teach them the fundamentals. And if they show anything, mom and dad are going to write the check, and they're going to write a big check and then follow that money. But I like your idea of charging them a fee, because that way the city is recouping money. So anyway, that was, and to Neil and yours points, you guys are spot on.
All right. I am going to go share my screen again, just because I want to make sure that we cover, so you get a chance to sort of see what the other communities offer. So Neil, I'm going to go back to Woodbury, and if you want me to go to a specific spot, just tell me. But I'm going to share the screen so you can kind of see. This is the City of Woodbury website. This is their recreation page. Obviously very COVID heavy in terms of its initial spots, but is there anything in specific maybe that you want me to click on, Neil, or that you want me to show folks?
Maybe the, let's see, where was it? I searched for their last brochure, like a 2019 brochure, and then I had kind of the look or the layout for the associations in there, as far as how they kind of advertise that. I think if you scroll up to the top on this search bar, and I just did rec brochure.
The fall 20 brochure. Oh, there we go. We're doing this on the fly, so I appreciate everybody's patience.
So I think they'll get the pitch. It's probably fairly similar. They had a specific page. They have their events and stuff, and there was a page that kind of specifically talked about, or in reference to the associations. So Mayor Arts is the dance program.
Yep.
He Create Studio is a company too. So here, this is their cooperative programs page with the local associations. And in there, and this is fairly similar in a lot of the brochures I looked at. It's a page similar to this, whether it's this or it says, a lot of them have youth, youth sports leagues and programs available through to people, to community residents from the following associations, and list them out with links and stuff too.
We did that in our brochures, but the difference was we weren't listing Maplewood associations, but we always tried to call out neighboring associations like North St. Paul, Fast Pitch, and that kind of thing, and have a page so people knew that things we didn't offer could be done in other communities.
Got it. So then I wanted to just share, I'm going to share real quickly. This is Coon Rapids. This is their, again, very COVID heavy things, but very sort of a different model. I'll just click on their brochure, which is broken, so it's even perfect. We really did just sort of make this up on the spot. So, but again, the offering from Coon Rapids is very different. It's very community education driven. I think driven largely that Anoka-Hennepin Schools is a huge, massive school district with a massive amount of resources. And so sometimes programs and services follow those who have the most money or the deepest pockets. And so that's one of the challenges that you face when everybody's struggling to preserve cash and capital. Different groups have different strengths. And so that's sort of the Coon Rapids model. Any other reflections or comments on kind of the larger cities, larger communities? Then Neil, I'm going to switch it back over to I'm going to go back to the chart and share from there. And then you can get a sense. We'll go into Roseville, which is a community familiar with many. And then if you would just want to share some thoughts and reflections on that.
Sure. So Roseville is very similar, probably the closest to Maplewood as far as size and types of programs offered and events and things like that. Their youth athletics, again, are pretty all association driven except for their fall soccer program. They have a fall rec soccer program that they offer specifically because the soccer association does not offer a fall rec program. So they offer it then. Otherwise, they pretty much stay out of the way of the associations. They work together with them. Again, ensuring that they're offering rec level sports leagues that are affordable. Otherwise, their youth programs, adult athletics, and adult programs all are strictly in-house offerings. Again, with use of subcontract or I guess contracted out programs as well as a mix of built programs. That's other things to consider too, kind of when we're talking about some of these differences is as Mike kind of said before, when you're if you're offering a program internally or building a program internally, the staff commitment and staff time, along with seasonal staff hirings, is that burden falls on the city. So the staffing of the departments is also an important consideration when looking at how the models are delivered. Just kind of throwing that out there. Brooklyn I don't know. I mean, do we want to look at Roseville all or?
Yeah, I was going to suggest, is there any questions for folks that have about Roseville? It's probably the most similar model to Maplewood. And so, right, sometimes it's helpful to just have a comparison next door. Dorothy and Audra, you're unmuted. Did you just want to share anything, or is that, I just want to make sure.
No, I'm just listening.
Okay.
And their Roseville's fall soccer program, I know I had conversation with them over the past handful of years as far as our fall soccer program and conversation about possibly combining or joining. They also, their fall soccer program encompasses, I believe, 3 or 4 other cities that play together. And depending on the number of teams each year, they kind of break off east and west as far as if the numbers work out that way, so there's less traveling involved. But that's also a collaborative league, which a lot of our youth leagues and a lot of youth leagues for other associations, no one can attest that to, are collaborations between many cities and many associations. So it's not generally going to be one individual association running the entire, their own all internally. There's a lot of multi-agency, multi-city collaborations with those specifically youth ones. Any questions as far as Roseville from anyone, or very similar as far as our offerings, just slight differences?
Okay. All right.
The next one that can talk about is Brooklyn Center. Their youth athletics are again association driven, and their youth programs city driven. As you can see, kind of the last couple of them were very similar. One of the interesting things they do, and we kind of talked about it a little bit with their adult athletics, is and also their adult programs, senior programs, and day trips and stuff, is a multi-city collaboration, a consortium, and they'll offer, let's say 5 adult athletic programs, leagues, and each city will take one of those and operate it, so that not every city is spending the staff time to operate 5 different programs individually. It's a group, and they all play in the same league. All the city's teams play in the same league, but it's kind of a shared time commitment where each one runs one league, and that way you're able to get more bang for your buck. And that's something that we've done with other cities as well. We've done it with Roseville, with Woodbury. Had conversation with Vadnais Heights about that, White Bear Lake, where we do either adult softball, or for the specific example with Roseville is we offered adult soccer leagues to Maplewood residents that played in Roseville's adult soccer program. And then we started a new 3v3 adult basketball program where we both offered it. And then I ran that program for Roseville teams. So we each, new offerings to each community, but there's a share in the time commitments that were not, it wasn't an overburden where everybody was able to offer something new, but be able to spread that out. So Brooklyn Center has the same, and they kind of take it to the next level where it's, they have, if you go under, I think, sports on the left-hand column over there, and then adult, and you just click on that. I think if you click on the front, that main page, the adult sports main link, so you can see what the organization as far as their basketball, broomball, golf league, softball, and then Brooklyn Park Recreation, Crystal Recreation, Brooklyn Center Recreation. So the entity that oversees that specific program, but they're offered in all the cities, if that makes sense. They do the same for a lot of their adult day trips and senior programs are able to. Part of that is being able to get larger numbers, make the leagues more viable, competition levels, be able to sort it out. If you only have 10 teams, it's, you're not able to split them into skill level differences. If you have 40 teams, it's easier to break them down and make the leagues more competitive and a better experience. That's part of what they're doing there.
So I think one of the things that I noticed is, they have this Northwest Metro Adult Sports League, which is 5 cities, Brooklyn Park, Crystal, Golden Valley, Maple Grove, Brooklyn Center, 6 cities, New Hope. And just if I were to do really terrible math, I would say those cities probably equal a population of nearly 250,000 people. Maple Grove is about 70 to 75,000. Brooklyn Park's about 80 to 85,000. Crystal, Golden Valley, and Brooklyn Center are each about 30 to 35,000. So you're talking about a fairly substantial population base that serves that one area. And it's if you've not been to the Northwest Metro, it seems like a long ways away, but it's actually very close and very compact in a certain way. So it's interesting when you can get 250,000 people in a pretty tight area. So not easy to do to pull all of those groups together, but also not impossible as a service model.
So this is a kind of an example of how we ran the youth basketball and youth volleyball leagues, and in the past the youth soccer leagues as well, with multiple cities involved and associations involved, with one entity, that being Maplewood, operating those leagues as a whole. So again, everybody else is able to offer that without having the burden of being able to, without having the burden of having to run it specifically.
So any reflections or questions about the Brooklyn Center model, which is a little bit more multi-city?
I do.
Yes, Bill, go ahead.
Bill? Yeah, just Neil, and anyone, is that their preferred model? I mean, is that pretty much, is it, let me see, you run into trouble with volume or participation, so you go ahead and contact another city, or is it the way they prefer to do their programs? I don't know if I got that question right.
Yeah, I think I know what you're personally, I think on a rec level, ideally it would be nice to have 6 soccer teams from Maplewood and be able to have enough teams and competition level where they're not necessarily having to travel on a rec perspective. Now that when you get into not having that ability to have a fair league, I should say, or have enough teams to be able to offer a fair league, that's probably the next step, is to invite other communities together to be able to make that happen, whether that's associations or cities or
I'm just thinking of, is it the the absolute method, or is it ad hoc?
Yeah.
I
And also,
would think, go ahead.
no, I would say also with the basketball program, part of it too is having the facilities, gym space, and having gyms available is an issue for some communities. So by offering a league with other cities, you can kind of utilize that gym space for communities that don't have access to it, and vice versa. So that's a little bit of it too. But like Neil said, at a rec level, just trying to keep the cost down and have, seeing our mission is getting kids, youth into a sport to let them try it and kind of decide what is their best fit, and if they have a talent or a love for it before they move on to that next level of, say traveling or something. Those things all factor in. So I think it kind of goes sport to sport, honestly.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No,
Mike Erickson.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to offer a comment to Bill as a native who grew up, native of Brooklyn Park, grew up in the 60s and 70s. That model has.
I did too.
Yep.
I was there in the 50s.
Oh, there you go. So for what it was growing up playing sports and things like that, just as the communities have changed, and Mike Stable used to work for BP, so he knows, but they've all changed, and they've all found out that we got to partner together. We got to work together. Yep.
Appreciate it, Mike.
Yep.
Other questions, Vicky?
Neil, did you say that we were doing those models before COVID successfully, or was that historical?
Yeah, so that's pretty much the delivery method we had for multiple leagues, youth basketball, youth volleyball, and youth baseball as well, where we would, and soccer also previously, where it was grouping up with other organizations to have a larger league. Part of that's based on the need, not having one or two teams in the division, but then also being able to offer that to multiple people. We've done, and we were branching into that more in adult athletics as we kind of expanded those offerings towards the last handful of years. And looking at keeping, as the adult softball numbers went down, for example, the team registrations went down. Everyone was kind of looking for ways. So we kind of ways to keep league numbers up, so it's not just 4, 5, 6 teams playing each other over and over and over and over. That we were able to kind of use the same method we did for some of those youth programs and work with surrounding communities and start trying to put those programs together.
Okay.
Then you had adult volleyball, where it was very, very, they always fill with the wait list, but we pulled from all over the metro area because of, again, gym space limits, how many leagues you can offer and how many game times. And so we had teams from across the border. We had several teams that came over from Wisconsin, the South Metro, just to come and play in our leagues. But we had it all centrally located here, with either at John Glenn, the community center, Edgerton, and Carver gyms. So there was that pull that way, but sometimes the gym space is a really important factor in how you offer a program.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to note, that really scarcity, right? Your volume of supply really does dictate. So if you have gyms, you can offer more. If you don't have gyms, you can't offer more. And that applies to fields and everything. So interesting thing to consider is the supply element of what's out there in the marketplace. And I say that as in my other life, I'm a youth softball coach with my daughter's team, and fields are a precious commodity, and I understand that. If there are no other questions about kind of Roseville or anything kind of that, or Brooklyn Center models, Neil, do you want to talk about Andover and why that is a totally different approach?
Sure. I don't know if you want, it might be helpful to bring up the web page too, as I'm kind of chatting about it, so they can see kind of the front page if you could. Perfect. So the City of Andover is different in their delivery method pretty significantly from the other ones that we've seen. As you can see here, the front page is specifically regarding their community center. But if we were to look at their So if we go to the, if we click on the YMCA down here on the bottom, that has, it brings up to where their youth sports offerings. So the city of Andover partnered with the YMCA, and then you'd see kids and teen activities are on that's there and has their programs and stuff listed under there. So there's sports, school age care, summer programs, day camp. And if you click on sports, that's going to be all their youth offerings essentially, other than outside of the association. So they have associations as well that are offering programs and youth activities. The city offers some, but in some of that's in partnership with the YMCA. But then the YMCA, they're the ones that are delivering the programs. Majority of the youth sports leagues with the associations, and the regular programs and activities are again city and YMCA offered. Their adult athletics are all YMCA offered through there, and their adult programs are a combination of the two again. So that's more, that's kind of the city partnership look, or the city look at a partnership with a YMCA at the community center, and which is again much different than the other ones that we've looked at. So that's kind of the farthest from where we're at, kind of the gamut, I should say, from us internally through the associations, through a combination, and then to a YMCA kind of option.
So Neil, thank you for, and Audra, thanks for pulling all this together. I know it's a complicated, kind of messy thing to try to wrap your head around because there's different ways to do it. We did include some other, I'm sorry, I'm going to go back and share my screen just a little bit. And so we'll send this out for folks so you can do some follow-up and do your own deep diving. We did review Little Canada, but Bryce, you're there. So it's sort of, we would sort of rely on you to tell us. We did look at Oakdale, and then more similarly sized cities. So Inver Grove Heights has a slightly different model, again, more driven by community education programmings. Shakopee is a long ways away, but a very similarly sized sort of community, very driven by cities. St. Louis Park has kind of a mix of all of it, mostly associations, a lot of cities, some community ed. And again, they do billing and pricing for field services. We did include Ramsey County Park and Rec, but it's such a different animal in terms of what they offer and how they're distinct. So, maybe what I'll do is I'll stop sharing the screen and I'll just kind of open it up for folks. And I think the one thing I'll maybe say about Maplewood is that it's a little bit uniquely positioned for a couple of reasons. One, it borders 11 communities. So there's an opportunity for a multi-city partnership is pretty broad. It does have a YMCA that does not have a real robust partnership in the way that Andover has. It does not have real deeply established associations. I think, Beth, you are the great success and partnership through Northeast United and NEU. And so part of what the challenge is there's an uncertain direction. And so what I would ask folks to do is to think about what is the model that you think would be really successful for us to pursue and do a deeper dive on? What's something that you think is something that ought to be avoided altogether? Really be interested in hearing reactions now that you've seen sort of different levels and different tiers of service. And so I will just open it up to the group as a kind of a broad conversation. I got 3 in a row. So I've got, I heard Bill, I thought I heard Audra, and I know Mike and Nolan too. So we'll go.
And Val too.
I just have kind of a general question as a novice. I'm just wondering how much parents and others really know about the enormity of this kind of task, because my kids went to 623 even though we're in Maplewood, and we went to the Little Canada Rec League to start basketball. One of my sons was good enough to get recruited to traveling. And, you know, most of the parents just kind of followed the herd. You know, my kid does this, your kid does that. I'm just wondering how, if there are a lot of real savvy parents that know all the background and how difficult and how much volunteers do and how much associations do. Just a general question.
Yeah, a good point.
So Bill, it's a good question. We've got a couple of association experts. Nolan or Beth, do you want to try answering that question for the group?
Kind of a wandering question.
No, it's an important question, I think. So either one of you, how do you recruit? How do you find kids? Do you find people following the herd?
I think kind of, you know, I think ours is a little unique because, you know, we rely heavily on the school district of getting the word out for recruitment. You know, South St. Paul being its own district, you know, we're not really competing with other cities that are tied in, as in like 197 with Mendota and West St. Paul kind of areas. You know, it's kind of easier to say, you know, we can focus on the school to recruit our players from. On that same point, I think it does we can get limited as far as the amount of people, also the amount of volunteer, you know, for coaching, you know, working with the association. I know that, you know, for the boys basketball, it definitely has a struggle of getting enough people volunteering for the association itself, and then you bring in the coaching and all that other stuff. So it's definitely a struggle, but I think, you know, generally the parents kind of follow along. I think the higher athletic kids, you know, they're gonna kind of pick up, and they'll get plucked out by, you know, the private clubs and stuff like that. But overall, you know, I would say it's the herd mentality of everybody goes for that same.
All right, I think I've got an order. So I've got Beth, Bao, Mike, Vicky, and then I'll keep watching the screen to see who else wants to go in. So Beth, Bao, Mike, Vicky, please.
Yeah, NEU relies on Maplewood Parks and Rec to get out the word about us. We're trying to contact Oakdale to get more kids to come over, because we offer we offer winter training from beginning of December all the way through April when games start. And they don't offer anything during that time for soccer wise. So we're trying to kind of recruit them or talk to them to see if any kids are interested in playing soccer during the winter and the spring. And we're relying on, the schools. We're trying to put ads in the, what do they call it? It's like a electronic flyer. The schools are.
Peach.
Yeah, Peach
Star, yep.
Peach Star. But yeah, basically getting the word out. I only heard about NEU through Maplewood Parks and Rec after we tried to get my kids when we moved to Little Canada to join Roseville. But they had too many kids in their program. So we're like, what do? We want to play soccer. So we looked at Little Canada and Maplewood, and they're partners. So we ended up at Maplewood Rec. And then NEU, or I think maybe Neil, reached out and said, hey, you know, there's a program called NEU that does soccer all year round. If you're interested, they'll do like half off deal. Mm-hmm. And that's how we got involved in NEU soccer.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. Bao, then Mike, then Vicky, please.
Yes. So I just want to say, Mike and Neil, you both were right about how Roseville is similar to Maplewood in terms of size and some programming. As a soccer mom, I only coach for Roseville. Even though I let my kids play here, I only coach for them. I like their youth rec program, the way it's structured. It allows a lot of parent engagement. But I think if I ask my question, I would be jumping ahead of everyone here, because I want to know, in terms of the association and if we do community collaboration or partnership with our neighboring cities. So I want to know, I think either I missed it or you didn't mention it. Neil, if in terms of if we do community partnership, right, would the hosting city be the one that's taking care of all the fees and all the participants just actually pay the registration fee, and that hosting city takes care of all the maintenance and what not? Am I correct?
Yeah, it kind of depends on the league. So I can use our basketball. I mean, the basketball and volleyball are similar and the same structure as all the communities that participated in it, that brought teams into the league, would all take their registrations separately on their own, and they would send us the number of teams they had, and then Maplewood would coordinate, would schedule the games. I get gym space from the basketball communities that had gym space available, so I'd know what they have there. We'd schedule all the games. I would schedule the games. We'd move them around based on trying to get some teams home games and things like that. And then and each hosting site. So in this scenario for basketball, each hosting site. So if Matamidi hosted some games, Whitebear Lake hosted games, Maplewood hosted games, they would all be responsible for their own expenses for hosting those games, and then we would tabulate the whole expenses as a league and divvy it out amongst on a per team basis so that all the teams are paying equally for expenses. But registrations would be on a community based, on their own community based situation, and then essentially it's finding that one person to oversee the entire program, because it's kind of hard to have 5 people being the head of one program, because it can make it difficult for communication purposes and just organizational purposes. So that's kind of that's the tricky part there. Is I think as a basketball league's going through that right now with trying to find coordination on that end.
Sure. So I think let's say maybe if we open up programs again, I think this would be a good model to try out to partner up with our community partners or our neighboring cities. But I would like to see us bring them to the table first, so we can have this conversation first. So that, to me, I feel like our kids get bored. As head coach of the team, it's like our kids get bored after we play each other. I know the season is so short, but to make it longer, maybe we can work together to work around that so that the kids can have a longer season. So let's say if we partner up with Roseville, instead of having our teams, when an option is to have our teams play against one another, another option would be for us to either start our soccer season a little bit earlier by like a few weeks, and then wrap it up so then the kids can actually go over to Roseville and play. Myself and the other parents just kind of tag each other along from Roseville to like New Brighton and Arden Hill because of the way their seasons play out. But I would like us to have that conversation with them to see if we can have that opportunity for our kids in each city to play one another, to get our numbers up to as well. But in my 3-4 years of volunteering with Roseville, they don't seem to have trouble with filling up their spots a lot.
Thank you very much for that. Mike Erickson, then Vicky.
Yep, very quickly. Just Neil and Audra, thanks very much for putting the information together, the matrix. It's very easy to follow, and I think something rises up right away. And I'll go to the other end and talk about programming and the use of Community Ed. I mean, that's got to be a partnership with us, with the success that they have had, both with the children and in the adults. And so at the appropriate time, having your counterparts, could they potentially be part of our conversation at some time? So I just wanted to make that observation.
Good. Thank you. Vicky?
Yeah, I was going to say something similar to Mike about Community Ed. I think Audra, at one point you said there was sort of an informal agreement based on what we would do versus what they would do. And I think it would make sense to make that maybe a little bit more formal as we're looking at a new model for Parks and Rec. Also, I want to say we're talking a lot about associations, but for me personally, in this time of COVID, I would be hesitant to sign my kids up, I guess, just because, you know, my son, as I put in the chat, participated in a basketball association in Roseville, and the gym is always packed. So I think that, you know, we need to still consider that. I think we could consider if associations could help with putting on maybe smaller group activities or something like that, at least for the time being, with COVID still being around.
Thank you.
Great point.
Aaron, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for putting that together, Neil. And I'm wondering from you, Neil or Audra or anyone, if you have a sense of, is there a city that is really killing it in your opinion? Is there a city that is kind of setting the benchmark that is, 'cause I see a lot of different models, but I don't know how to assess them, and I don't really necessarily know which one's good or which one would be good for us. So is there a city that's exhibiting sort of an optimal usage or execution of their particular combination? Because I don't know what the other cities are kind of doing performance-wise. So any opinions there?
Sure, and that I totally appreciate your question. I think it gets a little more complicated because you can go on service offered to the community and partners versus what is the budget allows and what's subsidized and what's supported that way. I mean, again, like in a perfect world, if there was a budget that was, you know, we could just provide the services, but you know, we know in this times of budget constraints, that's not the issue, or you know, it's an issue of what we can offer in staff. And if you have more staff, like your perfect world, you'd have, you know, maybe Roseville. I'm just going to pick on Roseville because they're close to us. They have a different level of full-time staff to offer programs. They've got I believe they still have their partnerships for both community gyms, you know, and so having access to facilities and fields and staffing can make a difference in what's offered. But I think it would take maybe a little deeper dive to see the communities, what they're offering and how much of it is based on you know, the city, you know, subsidizing it or backing it to make a fair assessment, if that makes sense. Because there's two different ways you could say, in a perfect world, what programs are they offering, who's reaching those people versus this is what you have and this is the best model for, you know, what the situation is now. And I would think associations, that combination of associations, city, and you know, partnering with more communities, I would think is probably the most realistic way for us to move forward. Or, you know, it's a tough question. And I guess that's why we're all here, just trying to figure out that perfect mix. But I don't know, Neil, if you want to chime in.
Well, Neil, I'll give you a second. I'll just add really quickly, Aaron, that is a great question because it gets at the core of what's the mission, right? What are we here to deliver? Is it around giving kids access and exposure to athletics? Is it about access and exposure to programs and service offerings? Is it about just a healthy community and what, you know what, we're just going to offer trails and parks and give people, let them figure it out on their own? It's a really deep question that we don't have an answer to. But to your point about which cities are killing it, I know that there's a survey company that does survey work in all of the various communities, and they actually ask them, say, rate your rec and park association service offerings. We could go ask them what's their ranking, sort of 1 through 100, and so that's maybe one way to get at, because it is a little bit about a perception. How do you feel about the service? I like it, I don't like it, and so that's probably the way that I would answer it with using data. I'll just do it as an aside. I got to play a softball game with my daughter in Chanhassen, and I'm convinced that there was a guy with scissors like trimming the grass because everything was like meticulously maintained. And so I thought that was great, but that's just me. Neil, what would you want to add to that?
I mean, not much. It's difficult to it's a difficult like question to answer because it is. I mean, every community is a little bit different. Every community does have the different, as Audra mentioned, different kind of staffing levels and program offerings. Those all impact it too. I guess it's hard to judge whether it's strictly a numbers based or is it a satisfaction based. So maybe smaller numbers but more satisfied with the programs, or is it strictly a numbers based thing, which it's a difficult thing to kind of answer off the top. But there are, I mean, we've heard here a couple of times from people that have participated in Roseville programs too that's our nearest kind of comparison. It's same size and with the offerings they have, and they've been successful. And I guess part of it too is depending on, are we looking at current or in a non-COVID regular type atmosphere.
And one thing, Neil, sorry, to add what you said is, I know we focus a lot on youth programs with this group, and because it is a very important part of what we do, but I think a measure of success for recreation programming for a city is the diversity of what's offered, and trying to reach as many of the residents that live in that community, and filling a need. So even if there is a surrounding city that maybe there isn't a service offered, that you can pick up and offer that service. So that to me is a measure of a success of how a city is doing their best. And that's, again, like Mike said, subjective, but it's something that we're always striving for. So
Dorothy, and then I see Mike has got it unmuted, and then Nolan. Go ahead, Dorothy.
Yeah, I think I want to kind of drill down a little bit. I'm hearing associations have the possibility of working, and their pluses and minuses. How are they miraculously going to form? If we don't have those kinds of associations now, where's the beginning of them? I didn't have kids that played in sports. I wasn't in a town that had associations. We're not familiar with them. Can somebody tell me how do they get started? Who runs them?
In the interest of time, because that's about a 6-hour answer, and I don't mean to be glib, but it's a really hard answer. Right. It takes a willingness on behalf of the owner of the facilities. Cities typically own fields and those kinds of things. They have the willingness to say, well, let's try something. You have to have a very small, dedicated, passionate group of people saying, listen, I'm willing to volunteer my time to make this work because I really am passionate about basketball, or I'm really passionate about soccer, or I'm really passionate about whatever underwater lacrosse, or whatever kind of thing that they're passionate about. And it requires time, sitting in a room and figuring out how would it work, how could it not work. And I think one of the advantages we have is we actually have time. We don't have a lot of things going on because there happens to be a global pandemic. So the one advantage we have is we have a little bit of window to build it, but it does require some resources, some access to some fields, and then some really dedicated people. Now that's the easy way to say it takes a heck of a long time to put together thoughtfully.
And can there be some kind of a recruitment training class, gathering to help people understand how they could form a foundation? As part of that process? It's not going to just happen generically out because two moms say we want to have our kids play soccer. If they have some help and some direction and some models from people who are currently running associations, would that help generate what we're looking for.
And Dorothy, I would say if that's the model that this group chose to recommend, I mean, I think Mike had said in the beginning of the meeting is we're getting to the point where looking at the different models, just trying to get feedback from this group of what you think is worth exploring, what recommendations would be, then yes, it would involve all those things if going the way of trying to maybe form associations in Maplewood. Absolutely. That's the short answer for that, but.
Okay.
Good. Nolan and then Mike, I think I said, I lost track.
I just kind of wanted to go back to the Andover with them partnering with the YMCA quite a bit. Neil, when you were looking and talking about that, did you see like the Y was pretty comparable as far as the sports and the activities that they offered, as far as like the other cities, Roseville and the associations? Like, do you feel like they provided the same amount of diversity when it came to different things?
It's tough to find out right now, to be quite honest with you, with the program listings that are available online. I did not have a conversation with someone from Andover or the YMCA because they did have the information, the overall, the umbrella of the categories that were able to be found online. But as far as the specific program offerings on there, they did look like they had a high school league for basketball. They had some younger grade levels for basketball leagues. I think it must be that they're offering it now or whatever. But as far as the whole, like the breadth of the catalog that's offered, I can't speak to that. I don't know. But that would be a good question to look into a little bit more if that's something that's information that's the group's interested in, I guess, too.
And on a non-sports league programming that they do, I did see that they're similar. They have the summer day camp programs there. They have the when school's out of school time care. And we currently have that situation when the Y partnered with the city. Those were programs we used to do. We used to run the summer day camp and all the schools out days and things like that. And we did swimming lessons, but the Y now currently does, and it looked like Andover is a very similar model. They do those programs in the community center as well as offering some senior programming. And I did see that they said you didn't have to be a YMCA member to participate in some of those senior programs. So that's just the non-sports leagues offerings that they have. They do for the city.
Good, thank you. Mike Erickson, go ahead, please.
Yep, real quick. Aaron, you raised a very important point, and I'm glad you did. Having worked for 10 cities in a county during my 31-year career as a city administrator, a lot of it has to do, and I'll use landfall. I was the first city administrator in landfall. The Park and Rec department was actually a nonprofit. The biggest city I worked for was Woodbury, and it depends when the city got set up. That is to say, the newness of it, and those are all meetings that take months and years to build that up. And I think Audra made the perfect point. In a perfect world, you got that much money and you're going to charge what it costs. Well, as we found out from our very first meeting, you can never, ever charge enough. The Y, generally speaking, is a little bit higher. That's their model, and they can do that. But it really gets back to the culture of the city and the involvement of the residents, and ultimately for Bill, the city council and staff. And it all depends. It all depends. So anyway, I just wanted to make that point from a teeny tiny city like Landfall to Woodbury. The Woodbury model, everything's great in Woodbury. Just ask them. They have a tax base that is second to none. They do. And they can do that stuff. So anyway, just making a point. That was it, Mike.
No, I appreciate that. I'm sort of steeped in the, because I one of my side jobs here at the city is to do labor negotiations with all of the members of the collecting bargaining units. I kind of have a sense for understanding for how cities have an ability to pay for certain services. And so if you don't have, say, the tax base of Woodbury, how do you recreate it? And you potentially do that through a partnership of, maybe other places or other service areas. So I'm sensitive to that model and really kind of, I've been swimming in it a lot in my head in terms of data and other things. So I appreciate that there's ways to win. If you're going to compete with a city that has a bigger tax base, you just have to be a little bit more creative in how you do it. And so I don't want to let money be the barrier, because it really doesn't have to be the barrier. It's sometimes, if you have a lot of will and a lot of good effort, you can do a lot more. It is 6:32, so I just want to do a kind of a temperature check for making sure that folks have had a chance to get their questions answered out of Neil and Audra. Are there any lingering, burning questions about other cities or any approaches that they have followed or do? Just want to make sure that you get your questions answered. You guys did an amazing job. There's no questions. Thank you, Neil and Audra, for putting in that effort and getting through the conversation. We've had a chance to hear from folks about kind of what their preferences are and things that they want to explore further. Knowing and understanding that we're not going to have maybe we aren't going to have the solution, but we would certainly have maybe the path shaped. I do want to ask from a staff perspective, and Bryce, if it's okay, I'll include you in this question. What do you see as some initial offerings or initial paths that could be maybe easier than others, or things that are more difficult that you would say, you know what, I don't want to go down that road? Is there anything that is a red flag for you, or something that's harder that maybe we don't understand?
I think we again, it's not to push it away, but just all options are there are good and bads to every model, if you will. I would say some challenges for Maplewood. Like I said, in the past, it doesn't mean we can't revisit it, but there hasn't been that built-in relationship with community ed. And to kind of speak to what Mike Garrickson said, it all depends when a city's built and formed. I think when community ed and Parks and Recreation here have always been separate, it's just been a kind of a unique situation. So I think we could make some inroads there, but we would have to have some meetings and some outreach and see where we're at. And now, and with what's been happening this last year and the year going forward, it might be the perfect time to do it. But that would be one that I know we've tried in the past. In the 21 years I've been here, I would say at least on 4 or 5 separate occasions over the years, there have been attempts to combine and cooperate and program together with community ed, and it was a little bit of a challenge. So just to be honest, but again, doesn't mean this wouldn't be the perfect time to do it.
Thank you. Bryce and then Neil. Bryce, you want to share what don't we know that we ought to know?
I love the idea of like this metro area collaboration and not competing with each other, kind of having the best interests at hand. And one of the things that I can hear, and I'd love to make that kind of something this group wants to look at moving forward. But one of the things that I think is going to be challenging is Little Canada residents are going to say, why are Little Canada taxpayers now going to be subsidizing Maplewood programs, Roseville programs? I moved here. I want to be part of the Little Canada community. And that your concern should be Little Canada residents. Your concern shouldn't be Maplewood, North St. Paul, Roseville, Maplewood. And so I think it's going to have to be the education, letting people understand that that some of these programs might not happen because of these, if we don't have these collaborations with these other groups, and the willingness of these other groups, these associations, to say, yeah, we might look at a reduced fee for a rec program, or those types of things. So it's just it's going to be someone said it earlier, getting all these people to the table and finding these answers. It's going to be a long process. And then when we're talking about moving towards giving the associations these kids, now we're talking about somebody's job, and is that appropriate? And that's we're affecting people, and it's just going to be tough. But that's kind of the whole purpose of this task force, right? Is it wasn't easy. And if it was easy, Maplewood would have just said, this is the answer, and we're not even going to involve anybody else. So I don't have the silver bullet, but I'm appreciating all of the conversations. So those are some of the challenges I see in the roadblocks.
Well, thank you, Bryce, and I appreciate that. Adding that human element to that was really helpful. Neil, thoughts on what's going to be hard?
The collaboration with other communities is obviously a discussion point for sure. The difficulty on some of those things is everyone. I mean, the tough part is getting everyone together, and 4, 5, 6 months ahead of time, if that's the route it goes down, and getting all the program timelines from all the different cities and communities to jive, to mesh, because everyone's on their own schedule right now, and start dates, practice dates, game dates, times. That's going to be a huge factor when considering that kind of thing. Now that it's obviously not doable because we've done it, and it's other communities do it. It's just a matter of getting those cities or groups or associations that currently are not on the same schedule, and making it worth it to everybody to adjust schedules and get on that same schedule if that's the route to go. Because there's a lot of history with a lot of groups and dates and times, and sometimes it can be tough to adjust those for where everyone's kind of in their ways, I guess you'd say. But that's good. That will be a big undertaking as well, but it's doable. It's just again, getting those people involved in conversations at some point too. So
thank you for that, Neil. Appreciate it. Bill Knutson, you work with a cooperative in your personal life and your business life. What advice would you have if we go down that kind of a road? What are some initial things to do that we would want to help put in a recommendation to say, if we go down this path, here would be a recommendation for a way to do that?
Well, the primary thing is in a cooperative is, what's the central purpose? I mean, what are you driving to do? And so, as I listen here and look at, what is Maplewood's obligation, I think, to its community, and certainly we talked about the parks and all that. But secondly, I look at the youth column, and I think we have a real obligation to provide youth programs. When you get into traveling and other kinds of, other adult things, I'm thinking more of a business opportunity. So I think there's a core sense of service out of your tax dollars that the community ought to provide for its sake of its well-being and all that. Then there's kind of the business of recreation and serving people. So the cooperative, what I just said would be a little more complicated, but if there's a central purpose, and a problem maybe perhaps you're trying to solve, or something you're trying to elevate, it's relatively easy to do, again, around that central purpose. Cooperative law is very much like corporate law. It's very much like a not-for-profit, but it has a little different purpose. Like, for instance, our cooperative, we have 24 big nursing home organizations. Requirements are that each member of the cooperative is on the board, which could be a little unwieldy. But again, if your purpose is defined and all that, it can work through committees and executive stuff like that. So I don't want to beat it to death, but I think this have and under duress and different situations, people are more inspired or enthusiastic about solutions. I think this is, when you look at, little Canada and its size, you look at our size and other sizes, and what Mike was talking about Woodbury, well, they have 70,000 people and a higher tax base, I would say, is in Mike's observation. Well, maybe we can match that in a different way, not to compete necessarily, but to be able to provide by maybe spreading our watershed out a little bit further. So anyhow, I don't want to beat it to death, but I'm impressed with the data, what other communities are doing, and I think One of the things that'd be interesting is we talk about the YMCA, and I don't know that our Y would have the capability of doing all of this. I just don't know. But the idea of putting a cooperative together, the idea of some kind of a locus of support, if it's Maplewood, great. I think that's something we would enjoy. If it's another community and it works for us and gets all our services needed, that's fine too. So enough.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that, Bill. Mike, you unmuted. Is that?
I did, just to follow up on Bill's point there. I'm still part of a Northeast Metro City Managers Group, and so I very regularly, or at least once every other month, are talking to them. And the YMCA is absolutely hemorrhaging big time. And in some cities, they've literally pulled out of their partnerships. That happens to be Mounds View. I did finally return to ours as a 22-year member. I went in, and they are a skeleton staff right now. I went in to get the tour to see if I felt comfortable after 7 months, and I did. And I went back the next day. They're doing a job, but they are absolutely hemorrhaging money. And running it really with a skeleton staff at certainly less than 50% capacity, closer to 25%. But just for all of you who may happen to be members or wanting to go there, they've done a very nice, their COVID-19 plan is very good. And I felt very comfortable returning. Yep. That was it.
Thanks.
Yep. Appreciate that. So I really want to say I appreciate the thoughtfulness of the conversation, and I think it's helpful to understand the challenges before we go ahead and sort of start to frame up recommendations. It seems like Audra and Neil and I we need to sit down and kind of rehash what we've heard, but it seems like there's some a path more towards partnership with other cities and with associations rather than saying, listen, we're going to do this on our own. So that sort of seems to be pretty clear. I did not hear a lot of enthusiasm or support for joining the Y because they have their own challenges, but they're not going to go away, but I don't think that seems to be the focus area for a partnership. And so correct me if I'm wrong, if I heard that incorrectly. Nolan, go ahead.
I would be more interested in at least exploring that idea a little more to see if it would be feasible. I think it's having the Y in your city is a good asset, and to be able to utilize it as much as possible, I think is something you should at least look into a little closer to try. I mean, I know in West St. Paul, we had a YMCA, had a facility here in town, and recently, sold it actually to Hy-Vee to build a store, and they're kind of semi-homeless at this point, so it's kind of a little lost to the community as far as, they don't have that facility there. And granted, it was an older facility for them and, didn't have a lot of space, but it was still better than what I guess is available now for it. But I'd be hesitant to throw them off the table right away and solely rely on associations and partnerships,
Nolan, one thing I'll let you know with our volleyball, I had mentioned our adult volleyball program, which always filled with wait lists. And when we didn't offer it this year, we did reach out to whoever had openings because the goal was to make sure our teams had places to play. And then the YMCA actually was looking at kind of pulling together a league. And so we reached out and sent their information to our teams, and they did put together some adult leagues. So we're working with them to try to, again, fill that void. And that was something they felt that they could do in the intermediate. So we are working with them just, on a smaller level and kind of as we navigate through this, but it's always that option to partner and make sure we're utilizing the resources that we have for sure.
I'm in agreement with Nolan. I would like to learn more about what the Y programs are and where that overlap is with what we're trying to do as well. Is it just youth sports? Is it youth programming? Like sort of compare and contrast that and see what they're offering and also look at pricing as well. What's the price difference for participants? Is there a huge fee jump or what does that look like?
Vicky and Nolan, would it be I mean, I guess maybe to the whole group, but would it be helpful if we could get, I mean, we've invited the Y to be a participant in this. Obviously they're, I don't think they could commit to an entire 6 sessions, but does the group think it would be helpful to have a representative from the Y sort of here and present and kind of talk through not only where they are, but where they'd like to go?
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, Nolan's point is correct. No, they're an asset for us. We have to hear their side and how they're positioned financially. Well, yep.
Mike, and more I'm thinking here is, that is our community center.
It is.
Who runs it for us. Yep. They've had trouble, and we just supported them through the CARES Act.
Yep.
We've reconsidered our capital expense to go into operations. And I'm not suggesting, they owe us anything of that, but, just saying, can you do our programs is not the right question. Right. The question is we have ideas around programs and how things should be delivered, how they should be organized. And we would like the Y to help us with being that locus. In other words, but not say we want the Y programs. We want the Y to help us with our programs. It's a little different twist, because what I heard Audra say is, when we've gone to the Y and we've asked them what they could do for us, I'm just wondering, if they wouldn't be at the table as we develop our own program. Just a little different twist.
Yeah.
And one kind of more thing to add to is I think maybe look at, in the future it's a mix, as maybe the Y can facilitate, the adult volleyball leagues more better, or, associations can handle these other youth sports better. And it's a mix of the two versus it's only, partnerships with the city or only youth association versus only the YMCA part of it. And, time frame too. I mean, I guess all of these sports don't need to get restarted in the next year. I mean, is it something like you phase it in over the next couple of years? Why, hey, this year, can we look at starting these type of youth sports and these adult sports, and then we'll look at starting an association partnership for this type of programming, and then next year you build on that if it works.
Yeah, one of the things I've been, and Audra and Neil and I kind of talked about, thinking through, how do you I'm actually thinking about how do you actually just write this into a kind of a report format that the council can appreciate and say, yes, we think this recommendation makes sense from here. Does the 4 categories that we talked about earlier make sense? Youth and adults. Does that seem to be clear for everybody, and seems to be maybe youth athletic, youth program, adult athletic, adult program, and put them in those.
Yep. Absolutely.
Head nods and hearing things. Okay, so that's a helpful lens then that we can box it in. So I think from a standpoint of broad direction, put forward an outreach to the YMCA to participate in our next conversation. The good news is the city manager, who's not on this call, happens to be a member of the Community YMCA Board of Directors. She happens to be the chair, so I think we have we might have some ability to have a pretty good access to some resources. So Melinda's not on the call, but she just got a task, which I'll let her know tomorrow morning. So I think we'll have a good conversation. The other question I want to put out to the group is who else do you want to, what's one piece of information that you think I really want to hear that? To Aaron's question, and we will do some research on who is perceived or seen as kind of the best way or the best deliverer of value, because that's really ultimately what we're after. And so we'll do a little research from peer cities about who's good at this stuff and why do we think they're good at it. So a little deeper dive in terms of our information. But is there anything else that you would want to hear or know as you think this through?
To reach over across the high school to the district center and talk to the superintendent and have that conversation with her. She's, as we saw with earlier this year when she attended the business engagement luncheon there at the YMCA, she's very engaged, and have that conversation with her to make sure at the very highest level that this conversation about a partnership with community ed, that she's aware of what's going on. I think that's really incumbent on us to do that.
Okay.
I agree, Mike.
Okay, we can do that. Others?
My head is full.
Well,
it's been a good evening.
I can't take it anymore. I can't take it anymore.
No, we wave the towel, and so our next meeting is scheduled for November 10th, which is 2 weeks from today. There is an election in between now and then, so if you have not voted and you're a Maplewood resident, you can come into City Hall anytime. We are open, and cast your ballot, slide it in the machine. We've got in-person early voting, early absentee voting. So if you want to vote and avoid the crowds, you're welcome to come to City Hall. If you're anywhere else outside of the city of Maplewood, find your polling place, do your civic duty, and we'll get our TV and radio back from all of the ads and commercials. So there's there's a light at the end of this tunnel.
We get our mailboxes back too.
Yeah.
Postal carriers will be happy, from their shoulders will feel better. So thank you to everybody for tonight. I know it was a lot, and I apologize that the chart was hard to see. I didn't see that I should have made it bigger, so I appreciate Neil giving me
It worked fine.
So we will send this out so you can kind of get the